Hello and welcome to another ARCHLine.XP Masterclass. My name is Builtin. I'll be your guide today when we talk about how to create lighting plans and electrical plans and layouts in ARCHLine.XP. So the topic today is not going to be about modeling, instead it is going to be about documentation. For those of you who are new to ARCHLine, we are talking about a software which is primarily an architectural and interior design modeling software, but the key thing is how do we create documentation, because when it comes to it, the thing that we are going to write invoices about, the things that are going to pay our bills are the documentational parts. So we need to know how to get the best about these documentation elements and how to create neat and clear documentation. If you want to know more about what we talked about last time, you can check back on the shows we had. Last time my colleague Iles talked about how to manage a project in a team. So if you have multiple users, you should be able to work in the same projects. And if you want to know more about the projects that we had or the upcoming projects, then I suggest you visit our website, where you can find under the webinar tab not only the shows that we have right now, but the shows that we are going to have and the shows we used to have before. So if you want to get started with ARCHLine from the beginning, be sure to check our website, and there you can find important details about how to handle an interior design project, even from the very beginning. Or if you are mostly focused on architecture, you can find content for that too. One of the things that we are going to discuss today is going to be lighting plans, and for that I suggest, if you haven't done so, check out the show what we did on layer management, because we are going to use layers today extensively. Also, if you want to follow along, you can download the webinar files I'm using, and you can also download the course guide, which is actually a very comprehensive document showing you all the measurements, dimensions, and the things that I'm going to do. So obviously I'm not improvising now, I'm going to follow a script. So if you want to get the script, you can do that for free with the course guide. If you have any questions about the things that I'm showing you, you can ask that in the chat bar. I'm also very grateful for whenever the questions are coming, because they are keeping my shows a bit more comprehensive and a bit more relevant to the things that you want to talk about. So what we are primarily focusing on is creating a document like this one. So what we see on the screen is a lighting plan which was created by one of our customers here in Hungary. We are very grateful for this project, and the exciting thing about this project is that we have a multiple page layout in which the model is the same, but tiny details are different. Namely, we have one page dedicated for a socket layout plan, we have another page dedicated for a switches and layout plan, another page about lighting elements, and another one about the wiring. So our task today is to learn how to create this very document. So we want to know, how do we manage sockets, switches, and lamps in a way that this will be the result? So for that, we have the project loaded up and ready to go. And we should start with a coffee break right away. We have a coffee machine right here. I figured that would be the best part to start with. Make sure you have a coffee or tea next to you, because this is going to be a bit demanding. So what do we have here? We have a two-dimensional floor plan with all the interior design elements. We see the furnishing parts and the light elements, switches, even a bookshelf. So there's a lot going on here. So in order to keep documentation clean, we need to know how to filter down the project content, and that we do with layers. So as we learned before, I think in my presentation 2 weeks ago, every single element goes through certain layers. So in order to keep everything clear, you have to make sure that the elements that you're using are belonging to layers. For example, a switch belongs to a switch layer. Why is that important? That is important because then you can filter out the project content with something that we call layer groups. Now, I'm not going to show them again how they work, but I'm going to discuss briefly what they do. So the software comes with all kinds of layers, and these layers you can group into certain layer groups, what we created here. So we created one layer group in which we have the interior design elements. For example, here we have almost everything switched off except for the decorational parts, the ceiling, the walls, etc. So here you can decide what you want to show and what you want to hide. Similarly, for the lighting layout, we have almost everything turned off except for the important parts about lighting elements and fixtures. And so on, we have another few layouts here. Now, the reason why we have this is because when we go up here into the this view control bar, you can filter what you want to show and what you want to hide. So if you carefully collect the elements into these kind of groups, then you can easily filter down to the things that you actually need. So for example, if you want to get started with a lighting layout, we just click on that and the lighting elements come up based on what is set up in the layer groups. Now, just a quick reminder, if you don't know how the layer groups work, don't despair. You can just go back to the website and check out the layer management show I did a few weeks ago, because that shows exactly how that's done. So having organized the layer groups, our task is to sort of see what we can do with these groups. And for that, I need to open my my course guide real quick to see what we get started with, because what we want to create is something like this, like a hierarchical organization of lights and switches. So that is what we are working towards. But obviously, we don't want to do this by hand, because if I do this by hand, that's cumbersome, tiring, and I might forget about things. So I need to look for something which is automated. And for that, first we are going to choose a wiring layout. And here I see that, well, I have the switches and I have the lamps, but there's something I don't really like, and that is how the light sources are represented. Because what we have here is actually the top view of a three-dimensional model. So if I click on this, for example, and I go to the properties, I see that this is actually a lamp with 3 spot lamps. That's fine, but this is not the way it should look like on a two-dimensional plan. So that is not good enough for me. I need to change this to something else. For that, I can go to Interior, Lighting Plan, and I can switch between an actual view of the object and and to a symbolic view. So let me just click on it and allow the software to make this change. And what I have here is now everything is turned into a symbolic view, which with two-dimensional groups that coincide with how these things should look like. Does this mean that the object now is changed? No, it doesn't. So if I click on the element, go to the properties, I see that this is still a 3-part pendant lamp, so nothing changed in this regard. It's only the representation. Now, these are ceiling lamps and these are spot lamps. How does the software know what is what? Now, it's very easy. Let me just put this to big screen, because that's the way we are going to use it. So if you click on any of the elements, I see that these are lamps, right? So this is a spot lamp. But how does the software know that this is actually a spot lamp? For that, there's a switch down here. So if you have a lighting fixture selected, let's say this one, and you go to the property bar, you see that there's a lighting fixture, and you can set that this should be a ceiling lamp, for example. So let me do an example here. Let me go back to an original view. So now I see that these two elements are now spot lamps, and I'm going to, just as an experiment, turn this lamp into a ceiling lamp instead of a spot lamp. So I'm just going to click on it and say that this is a ceiling lamp. Okay, seemingly nothing changed. But if I go to the lighting plan and again go to a symbolic view, I see that this symbol is now changed to how a ceiling lamp should look like. So this is a kind of automated way for the software to decide how to represent the elements. Let me just undo this, because I want to go back to the original way. So I'm just going to say this is a spot lamp, and here now nothing changes, but if I toggle this, then the symbol should go back to its original form. Now it goes back to a spot lamp, and now it is actually the actual symbolic representation I need. Okay, question here. In every single country, this representation should be different, right? So this is how we use the symbols here in Europe and in some countries in Europe and in Hungary especially. But how do we change this? For that, we have the lighting plan settings tab, and here you can decide that for every single lamp fixture, for example, for a ceiling lamp, wall lamp, etc., you can override how this looks like. So if you want to change into another two-dimensional group, you can do that here. So just don't despair if you don't see the right way. You can just go to edit and either find a new representation style, or you can create a new group. Okay, another way to track how your lamps look like and what kind of fixtures they have is in the lighting tab, and here you can designate the lamps. So if you want to change into another way of fixture type, then you can just click on what you want to change the lamp to and just click on the lamp, and then you will be good to go. Okay, so I think the lamp representation style is now good to go. The next thing we have to decide is how do we want to connect the elements. Let's go to the lighting plan and let's go with settings again. Okay, we already talked about the two-dimensional symbols. Next thing we have to talk about is the lighting plan connection element or the connection scheme. Now, do we want to connect the switches and lamps with a straight line, an arc, or with a text? I'm going to show arc and text for now. I'm going to use arc, and then I need to choose a line type. Now, a line type is something that you set up in ARCHLine, and then you can use it in scenarios like this. So let me just click on wiring, hit OK for now, and going to drafting and going to arcs, I see that this is the line type I'm going to use. So this is something that we have previously set up as a style. So if you have any kind of lines or elements, you can save them as styles and you can use them later on, not only as an element to create arcs, but also in scenarios like the lighting plan. So going back to the lighting plan, let's go back to settings. So now I have arcs and wiring, and again I can save this setting as a style. I'm not going to do that now, I'm just going to use it as it is. And my purpose now is to sort of connect things together. So what do we connect? We connect lamps and we connect switches. Now switches I haven't talked about before, and I think now is the time to do that. So if you have any kind of switch in the plan, you can connect it to a lamp. But first investigate how do we actually add a switch to the plan. For that we have an object library. If you go to the design center and you go to switches and sockets, you can find all kinds of switches that you could be using. Well, let's not add an audio socket because that's not something that we use very frequently. Let's, I don't know, use a plate switch, for example. So I'm just going to drag and drop it onto the floor plan. And if I do that, I see that a two-dimensional representation appears, which if I click on it, has three sort of ways. These are three nodes to which you can connect to any kind of lighting elements. Let's well, I don't need this for my plan, so let's proceed with this. So if I click on this element, I see it has two ways. Okay, what does it depend on how many ways a switch has? Well, it's something that you can define in the property grid. So now it has two. I can even decrease it to one, and now it has two again. So my task now is to connect these nodes to the lamps. Let's find a room where it makes sense. Let's go to the lighting plan, lighting layout, and so I think it would be maybe a wiring, and that way I can see the switches and the lamps as well. And now my task is to actually connect the dots. Connecting the dots is a good analogy because that's what I'm going to do. So I click on the switch, and now I define from which way I want to connect to a lamp. Let's start with the one on the top. So I just click on the node, and now it says assignment of switches and lamps. Yes, that's what I'm doing. And now the prompt says select a lamp to connect to a switch. So that's what I'm doing. I'm connecting this lamp to this switch, and now I need to drag this line to the way to which I want to connect. Click, and now I'm sort of moving the mouse to create an arc. Well, it's good to work with arcs because then things would be less confusing. So one wiring is now good to go. So let's just right click and go back to the switch. Click to the third way, and that will be connected to this wall lamp here. There you go. And I think maybe this lamp should be connected to this remaining node. So you see that now two of the nodes of this switch is taken. The third one is not taken yet, and I'm going to do that now. So I'm just going to say that this lamp is connected to the middle node, and there you go. So now this switch connects to 1, 2, 3 lamps. Let's proceed. Let's say that I want this lamp to be switchable from this position, but also from here. What do? I click on the switch, and I say that now this switch would be controlling this lamp as well. So the software doesn't care from how many positions a lamp is switched on and off. It just cares about having all the dots connected, which I'm doing in a second. So let's just click again here, and I'm clicking on the third node and assign this lamp to this way. I'm not going to do the whole thing because you will get the idea. Before we proceed, there's a very neat tool and sort of like an automated checker in the software to tell you if you have made all the connections. And that is under the lighting plan. It says display lamp statuses if I click on it, I see that now things are getting a colored view. 3 colors we care about are green, blue, and red. Now, green means that it is a switch or a lamp which is not connected to anything at all. So I see that this one switch is not connected to anything. Blue means that the element is connected to things, but it doesn't have connections to all the ways. So this 3-way switch, for example, it has 2 ways connected, but the third one is still not connected. And same story with the lamps. It shows that now it is connected to certain elements, but not to everything. So if I go back to the to display statuses, I see that the red elements mean that all the nodes are connected. So these are good to go. So if I, for example, go back to this switch and now connect the missing dots like this. And now I'm going to query the status again. I see that now these elements are red, which means that they are all connected. Okay, what happens if I connected 2 things together and I want to connect an additional element to it? Let's say that I started connecting this switch to this lamp like that. And I carried on with my work and I forgot to connect this lamp too. So now I want to connect this somehow to this circuit. What do? I go to lighting plan and I say add further lamps to an existing circuit. And now the prompt helps a lot. You just need to select the lamp to assign to a circuit and now select another one and well, let me just do this again. Here we go. So let me just click here first and click on the other lamp, and then you can assign it to a circuit. So that way, again, if I query the status, it's good to go. This lamp could be connected to another element as well, but that's something that we don't care about. That's one way to do things. The other way, and in certain countries, that's how they use it. They are not connecting elements with lines or polylines or splines. They are using numbers and symbols. And I'm going to show that too. So I go back to settings, and this time I'm not going to connect with lines and arcs. I'm going to connect with text. But the text style you can define. I'm just going to use a default Arial 100 and just hit OK. And the method looks a bit similar, but there are some differences. So for example, I need to connect this switch to these 2 lamps. So what do? I go to lighting, same story, assignment of lamps and switches. And now I'm just going to click on the switch, or let's just, I prefer to start this action from the switch itself. It just makes more sense for me. So let's just hit plus, assignment of lamps and switches. And now I need to connect to a switch. And now I need to place the text near to a lamp. What kind of text is that? That is actually a number. It's going to be a number. So now it tells me that place the text near to the switch like this. And now I can decide what is my numbering convention. If I want to number the switches and lamps with actual numbers or letters or etc. This is going to be going in increments. So if I say now number 1, then the next one is going to be number 2, 3, 4, etc. If I start with A, then the next assignment is going to be B, C, etc. So let me just hit OK. And now I see that switch number 1 goes to lamp number 1. And if I select another lamp on the same circuit, then it's going to be number 1 as well. So that way you can use numbers or symbols or anything else really to designate what comes under what kind of circuit. So if you want to use lines, you can set it up like that, or you want to use numbers, you can set it up too. I'm just going to go back to arcs. From now on, this is going to be rinse and repeat. Let me just show another example. If I want to connect this LED lamp, for example, then I'm just going to use the same thing. So nothing fancy is happening here. It's just adding additional lamps and additional connections. Again, display the status. I see it's now all connected. Okay, apart from the automated connection, what other sense does it have to do it like this? Well, there's another tool that I want to show you, and that is called the built-in power of a room. Now, what does that do? It actually calculates the amount of wattage provided with the lamps and the electrical outlets. But how is it actually calculated? Well, for that you need to have something in the floor plan that we call a room and area stamp, and that is right here. So let's just delete this, and that way I can show you how it's created. So if I have a room like here, now it's just a bunch of walls and elements, but how do I designate this into a room? I go to building, room and area, room by walls, and I designate this is going to be a bedroom, and just click inside the room. Well, this stamp currently has a built-in coloring pattern. We don't care about that, so I can even disable that if I want to. So I'm just going to say no to this, and it's gone. So now the contour of the room is recognized, and now this calculation does all kinds of estimations, the square footage or square meters, upper limits, etc. We don't really care about that. The only thing we care about is this tool called Built-in Power. What it does is that you just have to click on the room and area stamp, and now this dialog comes up with many things that we don't quite understand at this moment, but let me explain that. This is how you designate the room's current lighting plan or scheme. You have to decide what is the kind of role of the room. So if it's going to be a clean interior space, or maybe dust polluted space, or if it gets any kind of sort of illumination from outside. So we know that this room is going to be a community space, well, if a bedroom classifies as one. And if there's direct lighting, for example, if you have sunlight coming in, you can define that. So you say that, well, let's say it has direct lighting coming in. And what is the average luminous efficiency of the lamps? Let's use it as it is. And now if I hit OK, the software tells me an estimate on how many or much wattage is used in the room. If you have any native speakers, you can correct me on my grammar. Feel free to do it. I'm not sensitive about that. So now it tells me that based on the current equipment I have, this is how much wattage I have in the room. So this is an estimation which you can put onto your layouts. Let me just make a short, quick pause, have a drink of water. Okay, so the two major benefits of using a lighting plan. Number one is that the connections are automated and the software tells you if you forgot about anything. Number two is that it gives you calculations like that one. Now let's move more onto the documentation part and see what other things we can get from this lighting plan. Let's go back to our old friends, the layer groups, and go to the socket layout, because my next task is actually to dimension or measure out where the sockets are. So I need two kinds of dimensions. One is to tell me how far the sockets are from the corner point or from each other. And another dimension is how high they are from the ground level. And for that we have two very neat tools. They are called, we have to go to documentation for that, or dimension. Switches and sockets, manage elevations. Let's start with that one. So if we go manage elevations, and now the software asks me if I want to dimension everything automatically. I don't care about that. I want to do it one by one. All I have to do, I have to click on the socket I want to dimension, and I'm just clicking, and then the software sort of shows me this kind of label with an arrowhead. How does this arrowhead look like? Well, that's something you can create if you are in dimension and properties, and you have a label. Right click, open it up, and you can here decide how the label looks like. I'm just going to use a very default one, but if you want to use a different arrowhead or different letter size or fonts, you can do that here. Now that's just one. Let's just place another one just for good measure. So if I again place another one here and another one there, then that's how I dimension up how high they are from the ground level. That was one thing I wanted to clarify. And the other thing is, how do we manage the distances, like the distance between the corner point and the socket? And that's what I'm doing now. All I need to do, I need to find a style here which I like, and then I just click on the wall, and then the software sort of dimensions everything up for me. So I know that this socket is 20 centimeters from the corner point. Distance between them is 1.21 meters. Again, if you want to set up how this dimension style looks like, maybe you don't like these dashes, you just go to properties, length dimension, and here you can set it up to whatever you want. So I'm not going to bore you with these details. We have other webinars on that, but if you want to set this up to look different, this is how you do it. Okay, so that applies for sockets. Let me just get rid of these things, because luckily I already did this. So I'm just going to get rid of this non-complying dimension styles. I'm just going to go to layers, go to the socket layout, and here I need to just turn on the dimensions for the sockets. I think I have already done that. So I have the letterheads and the text here, so I don't need to do this from the beginning. But the same applies for for switches. So if you go to the switch layout, then here you can do the same thing. You can just go to switches and sockets and manage the distances and manage elevations and just dimension them up. Let's do it like this. I think the drawing is a bit dense, but you get the idea. So again, if you have a switch like there, then you can just dimension it up. A logical question comes, what happens if you want to do like a manual dimension, right? Because you don't have the luxury all the time to have it automated. Let me show you an example. If you go to the lighting layout and you have the lamps over here, how do I dimension where this element actually is? Well, for that you need to use a manual dimension. So in this time, automated will not help you. You just need to actually click on the nodes that you want to dimension. Let's say from the tracking this gray line, and just click where you want the dimension line to appear, and then you have it right there. So let's have another dimension from here. So if you want to do this by, well, in certain cases you have to do this by hand, so that way you can dimension up things very quickly. But in order to keep this clean again, I'm just going to go to the layer manager and turn on the dimensioning of the lamps. Here's another neat trick I'm going to show you now. So I turned on the visibility of the dimensions, but even if I try, I cannot click on that. Why is that? Well, that is because the layer is turned on right here, but this padlock is turned off, which means that now I have no ability to mess with this. If I want to, I can just unlock it and then I can just select it. So that is the idea. Quick recap: if you want to dimension something, you have two tools for that. You can dimension, for example, the fixture height, which happens in this case, which happens with switches and sockets, manage elevations, manage one by one. And if you want to measure the dimensions, you have certain tools for that, length here, or maybe just go with switches and sockets and distance. Quick reminder, if you want to change the dimension style, you can do it in the properties tab, and here you can change that to anything else you want. Now, having said that, I think now comes the time when we want to create documentation, because now we have all the elements. Question is, how do we print this out? And for that, I'm just going to quickly load up the finishing touches of this project. And there I'm going to show you how a layout comes together with using these groups. So let's just read in the final version. I'm not going to save this. And then I'm going to show you how the layouts are made. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to look at them. Question, can I create a customized symbol? Yes, you can, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes how to do that. If I forget that, make sure you remind me of that. So in the final version of this project, I have 4 separate layouts created. One is a socket layout, and the next one is a wiring layout, and there's one for switches and one for lighting layout. One layout missing probably is the interior furnishing plan, which I'm going to add an additional 5th page of this layout. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 layouts, and I'm going to create another one with the furnishing plans. If I go back to my original plan, remember I had a interior plan as well. I'm going to add this to the rest of the layouts, which I do by going to documentation, plot layout, prepare a plot layout, and now the settings I don't have to care about because these settings inherited the features of the last layouts I have set up. So I'm just going to hit OK, and the software tells me, do I want to fill out the plot stamp? Yes, I want to do that. And this time it's going to be the project is going to be a furnishing plan, and here's where the I should have hit OK. So furnishing plan. Okay, here we go. So here's when the fun starts. How do I add elements to this layout? We already know that. Probably you grab the ground floor and dragging and dropping it in 1:50 scale, and now I have positioned it. And here's the exciting part. If I go to this pencil icon, I can designate what is the layer sort of group I want to see. For example, do I want to have a wiring layout? I hit on the wiring layout, hit OK, and now my plot layout changes, right? So now I see the corresponding wiring layout layer group's content. Let me just hit the pencil and find another setting. I think I want now an interior setup. Let's just hit OK. Here we go. So now I have one A1 sheet. I'm just going to name this to let's say that would be A5. Sorry, A5 furnishing. Here we go. Let's just organize the content, and now I'm going to print everything out. So if I go to File, Print Queue, I see that the client who created this project already set up 4 layouts to be printed in one queue, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I want to add the 5th page as an additional last page for my documentation. Clicking on the plus icon, I can just click on the Furnishing tab, and now my software asks me what is the page size and what are the features, and if there's anything I want to actually change, maybe the focus of what I want to print out, because sometimes it happens that you have, for example, a different page size. For now, I don't have that, so I want to have the same page size as in the other cases. So I'm just going to say that for now it's going to be a rotated drawing, and the view is going to be this, so that's what I want to print out. Let's just hit enter, and then the 5th and last page of my layout is going to be added to the rest of my drawing. So that way you can create multiple page documents. I think the scale factor should be 1:1, because if it's scaled down already, then I don't need to scale down it any further, and I'm going to center it to the layout. I'm just wondering why. Maybe the page, oh yes, I want to change this because I want to change it to a PDF printer and not to a custom, and it's going to be view. Sorry about that. I should have saved into a PDF reader instead of printing it into an actual printer. I think this is something I have to take into consideration. Yes, the page size, obviously that wasn't good, so I'm just going to go with ISO. Okay, so page size was the culprit here. I was assuming that I was in A3, instead I was in A4. You have to go with A3. So let's hit apply. And I have page 1, which is sockets layout plan, page 2, switches layout plan, lighting layout, wiring, and lastly I have the furnishing. So I'm just going to say, well, I could say OK, or I could say print, and then you would end up with I need to name it somehow, so I'm just going to name it very quickly, and then you end up with a multi-page document which actually shows you all the lighting elements that you need. Just a second, let me just lighting layout. Let me just name this quickly, and yeah, I need to name this. I have to rename them, which I haven't done, but the idea is that we are going to create that. Printing is going to be taking a longer process, so I'm just going to instead show you the end result. So we would have all the document elements, and they are generated based on the layer groups that you have set up. So if you have one layer group showing only the switches and the connections between the switches, you can do that. Fixture heights, and also the logical connections between the elements. And that is what I wanted to discuss during today, and I think now we have another few minutes, I think, for questions. Let me just terminate the printing action. I don't need that. I think it has 5 pages, so I have to do this 5 times. Meanwhile, let me see the questions. So, can I create a custom symbol, and can the quantities of switches, sockets, etc. be added to the layout? Let's investigate. So let's start with the well, we did print it after all, so that is the print result, so I don't need that anymore. So let's go back to the 2D floor plan, and let's see how do we create something that we can use as sort of like a group to represent a lamp. Let's first see where these elements actually are. If you go to interior, go to lighting plan, and say that you want to go to the settings, you see that you can track where these elements are. They are under groups, switches and sockets, and here you can have additional elements. And let me just make a very quick screen grab of this so I will remember where to save this. So if I hit cancel, let's create something. So let's say I want to have a square which has well, I don't need to have a solid hatch pattern. I need to have instead a vertical dash maybe, and the line weight should be a black one. So I created this very simple stuff, and I want to create this into a light symbol. what do? I go to drafting, group, and I want to create a group in my library. And I have to select the whole drawing, hit enter. And then I need to click on the insertion points, like the reference points with which the element is going to be added or inserted. So I'm just highlighting the two extremities, the one on the bottom and one on the top, hit enter. And now I have the ability to save this into the library. So this is going to be lighting symbol webinar. And the category would be switches and sockets, and the subcategory would be English ones, and producer is generic. So let's just hit OK. Let's see where this ended up with. So let's just go to the object library, go to groups, switches and sockets, English ones, and it should be here, lighting symbol webinar. Okay, that's good to go. So let's now go back to the original lighting plan and change all the ceiling lamps to this new element. Let's do that. So we go to interior lighting plan settings, and by clicking on edit, I can change it to, if I can just browse it from my library, it was, what was the name again? Keep on forgetting. Lighting symbol webinar. Hit OK. OK. And now I need to toggle back and forth this switch, and then it should be having the new symbol. So let's just do it again. And here we go. Maybe you can't see it that clearly, but here you can see that. So that is the way, that is the answer to the question about how to create a customized symbol and how to use it. Pretty sure that this is not an industry standard, but you get the idea. Next question, can the quantities of switches, sockets, etc. be added to the layout? I think, as far as I know, there are two ways to do documentation on elements in ARCHLine. And one of them should be a switch and socket layout. Let me just very quickly check if there is a well, there's one for light sources and electrical accessories, maybe. Let's just see. Okay, so now I have all kinds of electrical schedule like elements for switches and etc. So if you have this kind of elements added to your floor plan, you can even organize this table of text to be a bit more tidy. But you have all the elements, all the switches listed, and then you can add this like any other drawing element into your layout. So this is actually a simple table text which is in dynamic connection with the content that you have here. If you want, you can slap that onto the layouts as well. So I think it's now too wide to be able to fit on a page, but you can do that, and that's the point here. That is the answer to your question. So thank you very much for the questions that you asked during the show. They are very relevant, so I hope you enjoyed this study into how to create a lighting plan. Oh, here's another question. How do you set the chosen symbols for your country as a default in ARCHLine? I think this is something that that you can do when you are setting up. So this tool over here is obviously working with defaults, but once you have changed this, the next time you open up the software, that is the symbol that it's going to use. So if you have saved your groups into the corresponding libraries, then you can browse them in from this dialog. And once you have done that, you can save it as sort of like a global setting. And then from that point on, next time you're pulling up this dialog, this would be the default. I'm not going to do that now because I don't want to override that nice X-shaped form, but this would be the idea. This will be the answer for how to make this default for your country. Okay, another question. Does the power in watts refer to normal lamps or to LED lamps? I think it applies to both, if that makes sense. I need to check that with my colleagues, but apart from that, I don't know more about that. It's if you dig deeper into the built-in wattage, which we currently cannot do because we don't have a room stamp. Let me just here we go. Now we have one. So if we go to the room built-in power, select it, then I think. Well, these are the categories you set up, but I don't know more details about if this power watts refer to normal lamps or to LED lamps. But for next time, I try to dig that answer up. So that's what we had time for today. That is what we wanted to discuss for the light plans. If you are using these tools, you can create a wonderful and clean documentation, and that is the point that is going to be paying for the bills, if I'm right. Next time, we are going to go more into details in terms of lighting plans, and that is going to be about grid ceilings. So next time when you tune in, we are going to talk about, let me just show you like a very quick preview of what we are discussing, and that is going to be amazing grid ceilings with all kinds of insets and panels and lighting things and smoke detectors and recessed parts. So if you want to know more about how to create grid ceilings and ceilings with LED strips, for example, then that will be the show to tune in, and that would be this Thursday with my colleague Ilish. If you have any questions I haven't answered, you can leave it in the comments, and you can reach out to me in an email. You all know what my email address is. Apart from that, if you like the show, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video so others would find it, and hopefully they would all find it very useful. For now, I would like to thank you for your attention and see you next time.